Hello, everyone, and welcome to Writers Drinking Coffee. This is a podcast where writers sit around drinking tasty beverages to talk about writing, publishing, and the whole creative process. There will be rants and raves and opinions that may not agree but are lovingly delivered. We do not censor ourselves, so consider us PG-13. Today, your hosts are Jeannie Warner and John Schmidt. This is episode 202, Interview with Karl Dunn. How you going, Karl?
I'm good. How are you two?
We are splendid. You're over in Berlin currently, correct?
I am. Yes. I'm here in my second home.
Excellent. Well, for those of you just discovering Karl, he is a multiple award-winning creative director in advertising who's lived everywhere around the world. A lot of talks on diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Mhm.
I actually had something that I wanted to laugh and bring up right away. You've worked in advertising.
Yeah.
You have you been part of creating the industry of marriage that your book, How to Burn a Rainbow, has victimized you?
Oh, good question. Excellent out of the gate. I love it. Well, I personally have never worked on any part of the marriage industry in the work that I've done. However, we definitely are responsible for selling there's definitely the dreams sold by the Tiffanys and the De Beers of the world. But I would say Disney's probably had a big hand in it. Disney, Hollywood, selling that dream.
Oh, absolutely.
And the wedding dress. I mean, that was Queen Victoria was actually the woman who started off the white wedding dress craze.
It's favored by Billy Idol, yes, and the whole tuxedo. Oh my God, we have all imitated them, all of us.
Yes, we have. Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, I've definitely played my part. I've definitely played my role.
You wrote a book called How to Burn a Rainbow. I just want to start
Mhm.
here and fangirl for a moment and say, I read it, I loved it, and I have now bought 3 copies for friends.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. I'm really glad you enjoyed it. Really glad.
Just May 2024, and I wanted to tell you why.
Hmm.
Because I have many friends that were using the same, I'm very sensitive to word clusters about their life, and you really beautifully talk about your experience of going through, you got married, but the opening of the book is starting to think about a divorce. And a lot of your word clusters and pattern of behavior really matched with a lot of friends that were honestly 2 of them straight. Only one of them is in a LGBT relationship. And so the same word clusters about a life and past relationship is still clinging onto their life like 20 years in a marriage later, like a dog wrapped around their leg. Proverbially.
Yeah.
It is a frighteningly beautiful memoir about divorce and how did you come to love yourself again?
Well, thank you. Thank you for the lovely compliments on it. It was I mean, it was something that I worked on for years, pretty much from the moment I landed in Berlin. And it started out as something that was a bit of therapy for myself and something that very quickly friends of mine was saying to me, you should really put all this together in a book. Friends who'd read bits of it, friends who'd seen the kind of video diary I was keeping of what was happening, the revelations and that I was having along the way, then, showing this to friends, and they're like, you really should be putting this in a book. So yeah, I mean, it became very obvious to me, even though I had written it so that no one LGBTQ plus would have to walk this divorce path alone like I did and not knowing what they were doing. It ended up becoming a much more universal story than that, which I'm really pleased about. I mean, I think I think our stories are universal stories, but are very often pigeonholed into being LGBTQ plus and therefore only for those people. And the book has touched people everywhere, people from, not in the community, people who are not going through divorces, but they're going through other life things and they're from all walks of life and they're seeing themselves in the pages. So, it's the greatest compliment there can be for a writer, I think.
Well, exactly so. And a frightening memoir is important because I have friends that tried family law and then dropped out because they did not realize the touch of horror that, I mean, it's only missing a kaiju and maybe you can substitute a lawyer for an enormous, lizard trampling through your world here.
Yeah, I mean, it is frightening when you do begin to get divorced because you realize that you have very little control over it. We as a community are used to breakups, and we understand what breakups are and how to do those. But what I did not understand about marriage at all is that when you want out of it, you have to do it by the government's rules. And if you're the one who earns more, you have very little say in that. And it's brutal. I mean, they call it the divorce industry, and it's an industry. It's horrifically expensive. It's designed to be drawn out and protracted, and it's awful. It's absolutely awful. I mean, it's a terrible thing to go through. And I think the system itself that's in place makes it worse. For instance, in California, you cannot get divorced in under 6 months and a day. From the day you file, it takes 6 months and 1 day for that to be ratified, minimum. So even if you're in complete
Almost
agreement,
have to file in Reno or Nevada or something to get it faster. But they're used to nullifying things that what Elvis has joined together, let the court of Reno tear asunder.
absolutely, absolutely. And it is ironic the way you can actually do a drive-through and get married by Elvis, and that is a legally binding, ceremony and
Absolutely.
document. And yet to get out of one is this long, protracted, expensive process that is, I don't think, serving anyone who has to go through it, gay, straight,
The
whatever.
sanctity of Britney Spears' 30-hour marriage alone could remind us that.
Right?
But it's even longer in Australia and Canada.
Yes,
I have
indeed.
friends, I mean, you're from Australia. Isn't it a year
Yes.
or more there and a year in Canada? So, ouch.
I don't know, but that sounds like the kind of thing we would do. Yes.
Yeah. What I loved about this, and I have to say, in the past couple years, I have come around to understanding the importance of memoirs. And this is first and foremost, I think, a memoir. Memoirs are the spirit of the times because there's going to be textbooks that are written about, good Lord, how many textbooks are there going to be written about what's going on in the world right now? 50 years from now, they're going to be all over the place.
Yeah.
Depending on who wins, but
Exactly. And memoirs like this are even more important because they are what it is really like for somebody. What it is like for my friends, the Speakmans, were, I think, the first couple married in Colorado. So you probably met Richard and David at the courthouse there. But it was for the people that were there doing it, the fact that you write about it and you write about what it's like in the LGBTQ community. I mean, at least in your distinct experience, it's important to say that because somewhere there's going to be some white guy writing a book about, oh, this is what the time was like. This is who has no emotional investment, no experience of that same time. So thank you for writing this memoir.
I mean, you're very welcome. It was, something that, look, honestly, had I had maybe a choice of the thing that I would write I would be responsible for the first thing in the world of something. I probably wouldn't have chosen, LGBTQ plus divorce as being me to, the thing that I do first before anyone else, like writing a book about it. I probably would have chosen the most successful app that ever was created. But I was very glad to do this book, and I'm glad for whatever reason I was chosen by the muse, and it came out through me, and it has really helped people and really helped change lives. But it's interesting what you say about it chronicling the times. I never really thought about it like that, but I guess yes, in a way, memoirs do become really these more than an historical document, but like a touchstone to a time and the feeling of it and what was going on, how it looked and what it was like to move through it. And, I mean, you always hope that when you're writing something that people can really imagine themselves there, that you use enough language that people feel they can conjure up the place in their mind, what it looks like, what it smells like. And yeah. So, but I do like that, what you were saying about it being like an historical document in a way.
Well, it is. And I think those are what's important. And you talk about living in different places around the world. And this is, for those of you saying, hey, wow, this is his first book. You've been a writer for much longer than this, right? You have been in the creative industry. So presumably you've been writing advertising content, marketing content. The fact that I have to use the word content is just, wow, there's a lot because I work in marketing myself right now. So
I see. Right. There you go. Yeah, no, I've been writing my whole life. I mean, even when I was a kid, I used to write short stories. I just love writing. I love the process of it. I love the the putting down of something onto a page. And yeah, I worked for, a long time in advertising. I thought very seriously of going into acting and becoming an actor and playwright, but instead I went into advertising and I had a great career. I really enjoyed it. It's a very transportable career, which allows you to move all over the world. So I was able to write in all these different countries, to write work that is relevant for all the people who are living there. So that was a great privilege. And there was 7 of those years where I was living in LA. I first moved there to be a screenwriter. So I was writing film screenplays.
Did any of them get published?
No, it's an interesting thing about the film world. It is maybe 1% of screenplays get made, maybe. It's less, I think. And yet, there are people there making extraordinary livings out of being writers, even when they've had nothing produced. So, for instance, it wasn't the career I would have chosen for myself, but the career I seem to forge in Los Angeles. And this, I think, comes from having a global advertising background, is that I don't wait for inspiration. I sit down and write, and I'm creative on demand because that's my job in advertising. Like airtime's been booked, something's going on, you have to produce. So I had a reputation in LA of being somebody who could turn a first draft around very quickly from a log line or, source material or even just an idea from a producer. So I had that. And then I also did dialogue punch-ups. So I was very good with dialogue and I could punch a script up very quickly and give people a distinct voice. So yeah, I mean, I was doing this for years and years and years and years. And then when I started writing this book, it was a different format. It was a new challenge and one that I had to learn.
Well, I love that hearing you were actually on the writing desk. We've chatted with a couple other people that worked in doing similar things, part of the writing group. For those people not out there, there's a lot of television shows and even movies that aren't just written by one person. It really is a coherent collective, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a lot of ghostwriting done. Like all of that work that I did, if any of it had been made, none of it was, I would never have been credited for the work that I'd done. It was all ghostwriting. And this is not uncommon. I mean, some of the best people, some of the most successful people in the industry, you've literally never seen their names, but there'll be the person called in when a script is in trouble and they cannot figure out how to break the third act, or, script doctoring is very widespread and lucrative if you're one of the best. So, I mean, there's huge careers to be made. And I always found it very interesting working on other people's work because you now must drop into their voice and look at their intention of what they were trying to do with the script or what the producers are trying to do with it or the director, whoever it is who is your boss at whatever stage the script is at. And you have to be in service of the work, not in service of your ego or how you would do it. You can make suggestions, but your job is to be in service of the work and fix the problems that they have asked you to fix. That felt very much like being in advertising. Here is a creative brief. It's got to be on a TV or it's got to be on a billboard or it has to appear online, and figure it out for that format, for this time, the duration of it, if it's still or moving, and how to make that interesting and exciting and relevant.
Well, you talk about your process of writing and you describe it through your book, and I write this and I wrote that. Tell me how much of that was just anecdotes, and did you just write down an anecdote of what you were thinking or feeling, or was it a beginning to end process? Or tell me about your process of how did you pull it all together? Did you have to format later? What'd you do?
Actually, I wasn't sure what it was supposed to look like when I first started with it. I knew I had something, I didn't know what to do with it. And I saw an interview or read an interview with Alex Garland, who is a writer and director. And he wrote a lot of films that Danny Boyle made. So he wrote The Beach. He actually wrote the book, The Beach, and then the screenplay for it. And then he wrote 28 Days Later, 28 Weeks Later, Sunshine.
Zombies.
Yeah, I mean, he's been really prolific. My favorite thing of his is Ex Machina. I mean, that is a masterpiece. Beautiful film. But yeah, I mean, he said his process was when he got something, he would literally just sit and do an idea dump and he would just write. He would write scenes, he would write anything that came to mind, literally with no thought of how it was all going to fit together. And he would just do that solidly for 3 days. And then he would take 3 days off and just game nonstop. And then he'd go back on and write 3 more days nonstop on the script. And he would end up with a pile of like a Word document that was pages and pages and pages long. And then he would literally snip it up and stick it back together like a jigsaw puzzle with sticky tape. And I thought, yeah, that sounds like it might work. So that's what I did. The first draft, it was literally written that way, and it turned into a guidebook. It was actually originally called The Gay Man's Guide to Divorce, and it was written as a guidebook. And when I gave it to someone to read, they said, I think there's a much bigger and better story in this that is like a gay eat, pray, love, and you're hiding within the framework of a guidebook. And I think you're using it as a way to shield yourself so that you don't have to be completely honest about what happened to you. And I was like, ouch, that hurt. Yep. And you're 100% right. Okay.
There is a lot of examination that's the reason I love this was that personal emotional journey, anger, denial, bargaining, depression, acceptance, that you really, you talk about the phases of coping. And that's kind of what I loved about it. And I think you're going to be your own spirit guide for a whole bunch of other people that read it that need,
I hope so.
this sort of thing.
Well, I hope so. Yeah. I mean, I'm very proud of what it became because even when I was writing it as a story, even the second and third drafts were very hot and they had a very particular point of view they were working very hard to sell the reader on. And, gradually over the drafts, the vengeance and revenge parts of it just fell away. Working with defamation attorneys also, they'll call you out on everything in there that is unprovable or what you've expressed as a fact that is in actuality only an opinion.
Right.
And working with them, which was a long expense, like you can imagine paying lawyers to read a book is not the cheapest thing you can do in your life. But it made it such a better book. I mean, it made it into the book that it's become that I'm really proud of. And I don't think that would have happened without them. So
it's important. I've watched people going through a divorce post on Facebook, hey, everybody, this happened, and then get sued for it. So that's
Yep. That's one of the first and the biggest lessons I got right at the start was anything you post can and will be used against you in a court of law. Don't ever put your relationships or breakups on social media. Just do not do it. Do not do it.
That goes out there for work relationships too, there, people.
Yes. Yeah, don't be posting that stuff looking for cheerleaders and people that go, oh my God, that's awful. Like it's just, you need to go and confront the people who are doing this, not tell the rest of the world about, how badly you feel you were treated.
It also adds in nicely. You have a lot of the DEI commentary in there as well, because there's statistically, I mean, I play ice hockey with a lot of lesbians who have slightly from how you've described the gay LA relationship. The lesbians up here are very different, but at the same time, every year we have to say, oh, those two were dating. We don't put them on the same team this season.
Yeah, it very much will split a group. I mean, I think when we all started getting married, we definitely had that Disney idea, that Hollywood idea of what it was. And I think we sort of, for some reason, based on absolutely nothing, I mean, I speak for myself here. I just thought, oh, we're just going to do this better. I don't know why.
That's a beautiful idea.
It's a great idea. It's based on absolutely nothing because it's like, hang on, how many breakups have you had in your life? So you're going to do this better somehow.
I mean, it's almost like saying that you're superhuman, which is a beautiful idea, but humans are still very messy.
We are such messy creatures. I mean, such messy creatures. The LA gay scene was not, something I say in the book is the worst thing about being, the number one worst thing about being the only gay man, getting a divorce is you are the only gay man anyone knows who's getting a divorce. And that also didn't go down very well in our community. We fought very hard for the right to marry, and my ex-husband and I were some of the first to get divorced. And, people made their opinions of that very well known. Some people, like total strangers, would walk up in bars and go, are you the one getting a divorce? And I'd be like, yes, random person I don't know. And they're like, well, thanks a lot. Thanks for wrecking it for the rest of us.
Weirdly, I would think it would be the other ones the cycle of legitimacy that it's like, hey, you're exactly like straight relationships now because you deserve your right to wear the wedding dress and pay a lot of money. I mean, at very least, I think the legal lobby all around the world ought to say every lawyer in the world wants a chance to represent even 10% more people. So it's a growth industry.
Oh, 100% it is. It is. I think it is the most practiced body of law in America is divorce law.
I could believe that.
Yeah, and it's unbelievable once you're in it. And the difference having great lawyers can make is you would think with the law being as simple and set as it is that it would almost make no difference who's representing you because it seems very set, but it is like every profession, like any sport, there are people who are just incredibly good at it. And the best kinds of lawyers are the ones who approach it surgically. They have zero interest in anything that's not going to help the case. They won't let you indulge it. They will tell you outright, I am not here for you. I am not the shoulder for you to cry on. That's for your friends. I'm the one who's going to get you out of this as quickly and cheaply as possible. And, not every lawyer works that way. I definitely have heard, obviously, a lot of stories of people getting divorced now, and the over litigation that goes on, the warmongering that is encouraged by a lot of lawyers is really, it's not great, and this is at a point in most people's lives where, they're literally having the worst time in their lives. And it's being monetized. It's not great.
I almost feel like this if you didn't have a minor in psych, you could have gotten one out of this just on the tools that it puts together for how to deal with your own emotions and to look at them unflinchingly. And I really appreciated that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And again, coming back to that DEI comment that you had made before, this is, the book is a compendium of wisdom from so many different people. I mean, it's an incredible thing when you set out on a journey, as I did, with using the divorce as the catalyst to figure out who I am and go on that quest to find myself. It's amazing when you go on a journey, people just pop up, guides pop up left, right, and center, and they have the right information at the right time. They might be around for literally just a single conversation, or they might be around for a week or a month or a year or the rest of your lives, but they're just there at that right time with that right info. And, a lot of what I learned about how to handle myself, some of it I figured out myself, but it was through weaving together pieces of wisdom that I'd been handed by so many people. And it was, these were really useful tools. They got me through my divorce in one piece. They helped me figure out who I am and get to the bottom of why I do the things I do. So, thank you.
If somebody else were going to start writing somewhere, I mean, you had the experience of just being able to sit and dump and write. What would you say to somebody that's like, I think I have a book about my own experiences in me? What advice would you give them?
I would say if you want to write, then you write. There's no, by writing, you become a writer. By talking about an idea that you want to write, you're not a writer. You're someone who has an idea, and everybody has an idea for a book. I think only 2% of people actually sit down and do it. And it is, I can tell you, if anyone is listening and they have a book in them, they think they have a book in them, write it. It is the greatest gift you can give the world is your own personal experience, because it will touch people in ways that you can't even imagine. But to get that book down, you must write. And the way, I'm fortunate, I guess I'll say in air quotes, in that, I'd been fired from my job. I'd left the country. I was in a squat in Berlin with no money, no idea how my divorce was going to end. I was still in the middle of it, no lawyers. I had nothing but time. So I was writing the book actually to keep my sanity, and I was writing 6-7 days a week. But what I would say is if you want to write a book, you just set aside some time every week, and that is your writing time, and protect it with your life. Figure it out with your partner. If you have kids, like whatever your responsibilities are, figure it out with everybody so that time is yours and yours alone, and everybody knows to leave it alone. And then all you have to do is turn up. You don't have to write anything good. You don't have to write much. But your job is just to sit at your laptop and receive the story. It will come through you, and your job is put it down on the page. Don't judge it while it's coming out. Just write it. You can judge it later.
I think Taika Waititi said you have to sit down and you can you stare at the page for an hour and then you close it and walk away. And that counts as writing. It does.
Yes, you can do that. And I would say even write it if it feels bad. It's much better to go back and edit something that's terrible than to have nothing there at all. A screenwriting trick we used to use was you had to sit down and write 4 pages every day for a month. And at the end of that month, you'll have something between 110 and 120 pages. And now you have a screenplay. It might be awful, but you have one. And it's the first draft, and there's no such thing as writing. There's only rewriting. And you have now something to work with, but you have to get that first draft down. Yeah.
Done is better than perfect.
Done rocks over published is better than perfect.
Published is better than perfect. Exactly.
You will never finish a book. The book is never, when I was on my book tour and I'm reading things out to people, or I'm quoting stuff on, on podcasts and whatever, I'd be reading going, I probably would have phrased it differently now. Like you could keep rewriting a book forever. There's just at some point you go, it's good enough now, and I'm publishing it, and
Yeah.
you just have to let it go.
I honestly think writing is better now than, I mean, when I go back and read stories and books that I read that were written in the 60s and 70s, and I look at them through modern eyes, I'm like, it's better now. Like, even in screenplays, I
Mm,
look at stuff that I loved from
mm.
the 70s and 80s and like, wow, that is stilted, terrible dialogue now, but
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was, it got it done. And
Yes, yes.
it was what we expected. So, where are you going now? I mean, you mentioned that you used to write short stories and things. Will we be seeing more out of you?
Good question. Well, the next thing I'm writing is a book about how to connect people again in a divided world, how to connect.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think there were many ways I was thinking of going for the next part, and it could have been fiction, it could have been many other things, but this is the book that's calling me, and it's quite interesting. I was not expecting to get or start off a career on the speakers circuit after writing a book about gay divorce. But it's the themes that have come out of it, the DEI stuff that has come out of the diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Mhm.
These are the things that are really important to me. And I think, honestly, we need them more than ever. We are so divided as a planet. And I think division is our number one enemy. I think it is at the root of every problem that we're seeing on every disaster we're seeing on our screens. It's division, it's because there's two or more groups or people not talking to each other. And I want to write a book that helps people understand how to reconnect and how to actually be in conversation with people that are the most polar opposite to them, the people the furthest from their bubble or their echo chamber. Because I firmly believe, because it's my life experience, that these are the people we have the most to learn from about ourselves. So that's what I'm going to be working on next. I don't have a title for it yet. It is still forming, but I'm very excited about that book and the possibilities of what it could be.
I think that sounds fantastic. As I've traveled around and run into people and realized I'm talking to this woman and we're both straight white girls with utterly different life stories. Like,
Mm,
I ran into a
mhm.
coworker that once said, well, I'm the only woman in my church with kids that actually has a full-time career. And I sort of stared at her for a long moment saying, wow, we have in some ways nothing in common and in other ways everything in common. So,
Yeah, it's well, what I found was that, I was put in the company of so many different people who I shared before this experience very, very little with. But divorce is the great equalizer, something that it does not care who you are, what your religion is, what your ethnicity is, how much money you make, your politics. It does not care. Divorce is the same for everybody. And there's something I write about in How to Burn a Rainbow where I say, my first day that I turn up at the divorce for my divorce trial, the first hearing for it, was at the same courthouse where I had been, protesting outside of about 9 years before at the Prop 8 rallies.
yep.
And I thought, well, this is interesting because I'm back at the same courthouse. There's a line of people waiting to get in, and no one's protesting my right for a divorce. No one's protesting that.
No.
And in this line of people, I'm sure there were people who voted against my right to get divorced, and yet here we all are.
I,
Hmm.
as a woman who had to have a hard time getting a divorce, there are people not aware that there's states in America where a pregnant woman will not be granted a divorce.
Yeah, yeah, you find
So
out all kinds of crazy divorce stuff when you
there's
start
there's
getting
a
into the
lot of weird
weeds.
divorce
Yeah,
stuff out there, and it's anyone
yeah.
who thinks that even any one country has one set of laws. So not true.
No, no, definitely not. And I think, it's particularly in the States where states' rights are so strong. It's very different in Australia where once something's passed federally, that is it. It supersedes any state laws. As in my understanding of how the legal system works in Australia. But in America, states' rights are powerful. So it can differ wildly state to state.
I
Mm.
don't know. I was in New South Wales, and they didn't seem to trust that the federal government had let me into the country, but New South Wales was very, very sus.
So look, honestly, I get stopped and asked a billion questions every time I go through there, and I'm like, I have an Australian passport, y'all. Like, I mean, I'm from here, but I always get the third degree when I go through, if that makes you feel any better.
I, I do, except for in Australia, and everybody needs to know this, you can hold your latte and walk through security with your latte. It's magic.
Yeah, we have the coffee thing sorted out. That is true.
That's because coffee's important there.
Oof, yes.
And thank you so much for being with us here today on Writers Drinking Coffee.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. Really appreciate it.
Everybody needs to run out, get a copy of How to Burn a Rainbow. It is available on Amazon. Are there any other places you want people to buy it from that are not Amazon?
Well, I mean, if you are it's on all online platforms. So if you're, say, listening and you're in Canada, it's on Kobo as well. But it's available pretty much anywhere. You can go to any bookstore if you like supporting your local bookstores. You can tell them about the book. They can look up the ISBN number and order it in for you. So however you like to buy and consume your literature, you'll find How to Burn a Rainbow there waiting for you.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much today, Karl.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Writers Drinking Coffee, and we will put links to the fascinating things discussed, mentioned, dropped, name dropped during this episode on our website, which is www.writersdrinkingcoffee.com. This is a labor of love and enthusiasm put together by our hosts. Our main web magic is cast by Deirdre Schween, and our sound engineers and backup web spiders are David Welsh, John Schmidt, and Ksenia Chernievskia. Our intro and exit music is performed by Michael Ingberg, who lives down under in Hervey Bay and runs Tin Can Music School. Our podcast sponsors are Jackal Designs, The Bean Scene, Arm Street, and wherever you like to take your laptop and write. And hey, thanks for listening.